Half a day. The Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture is now called to order. Today is Wednesday, February 16, 2022, and the time is 12:48 p.m. Notices for this virtual public hearing and oversight hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Wednesday, February 9th, 2022, and again on Monday, February 14, 2022. The notice was also published in the Guam Daily Post on the same days. The Zoom meetings hosted by the legislature's AV staff and my committee staff, and I thank them for their assistance. The host, will mute all Zoom participants until called upon by the chair. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking, and please begin by stating your names for record-keeping purposes. I'd like to thank my colleagues who have attended this afternoon's hearing, beginning with our Vice Chair, Senator Sabina Flores-Perez, the Minority Leader, Senator Christopher Duenas, and Senator Terlaje. Thank you, colleagues. I'd also like to thank the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners and the staff from the Department of Public Health and Social Services Health Professional Licensing Office who are here with us today. So I had invited each of the board members to attend today's oversight hearing so that we can get a better understanding of the board's discretion with the licensure of applicants and to gauge any potential changes that might be necessary in the statute or additional policies that must be put into place to better clarify the board's procedures and authority in this regard. Furthermore, to establish whether there are set guidelines or some certain policy that the board follows when using their discretion, and if not, whether they are able to set guidelines moving forward. So I'm now going to read the names of the board members who are here, and actually all of the board members. So beginning with Chairperson, Dr. Mamie Balahaja. She is in the position, so this is an Allied Board of Health Allied Board of Health, and it's comprised of different fields. So I'm also going to read the fields represented by these board members. So Dr. Mamie Balahaja, who's the chairperson, she is a clinical psychologist. Dr. Vincent Pereira, who is a licensed professional counselor, licensed mental health counselor, and he's also the vice chairperson. Catherine St. Nicholas, who is a clinical dietitian and nutritionist, and the treasurer. Sybil Crisostomo, who's a speech language pathologist. Dr. Greg Miller, who is a chiropractic member of the board. Alicia Ogo, who is an occupational therapist. Dr. Paul Pomes, who is a veterinarian member. And then we have Dr. Richard Chong, who is an acupuncturist. And then thank you all for being present here today. I'll now announce the other members, who are Nadine Cepeda, who is also a licensed professional counselor, marriage family therapist, and licensed mental health counselor, who's the board secretary. Not present today. Also Ryan Claros, physical therapist member. Greg Cruz, who's a respiratory therapist member. Ray Tahaji, who's a physician assistant member. Dennis Triolo, who's the audiologist member. And there is one vacant position on this board, that is the podiatrist member. All right, again, thank you to those board members who are here today. I think it's very important that the public hear from you. So prior to the start of this hearing, thank you for waiting with us during the delay. We were swearing in all of the members of the board who are going to provide testimony. We also had a few technical difficulties. So everyone's been sworn in. So we also have some members of the public present with us today and members of the HPLO staff as well. All right, so this oversight hearing will focus on two items that I've tried to focus on are the board's procedures and discretion in licensing allied health practitioners with complaints in other jurisdictions, and the complaint investigation and hearing timeline updates to the complainants, or the reporting entities. So section 12803C of Title 10 is the Allied Health Practice Act, and it outlines the powers and responsibilities of the board to evaluate professional performances of the applicants, issue or deny licenses, review and investigate reports and complaints, discipline licensees, enjoin violations or violators of the Allied Health Practice Act, establish appropriate fees and charges to include support of active and effective pursuit of its legal responsibilities. Section 12811 of Title 10 is relative to the acts of unprofessional conduct that shall result in disciplinary action. And these include, there's a list there of everything that the board shall deem unprofessional conduct. And this of course includes sexual conduct, battery, and assault. Section 12810 lists the grounds for denial or revocation of licenses that the board may use. And these, of course, include a whole list of actions that the licensee might do that would be grounds for their removal. I'm not going to read those to you, but I provided those in the chat, and I made them available to all the senators so that they can be reminded of the duties of the board. So the Committee on Health has had 2 oversight hearings with the Guam Board of Allied Health so far. On June 29, 2020, the first oversight, the committee focused on the status of revolving fund allocations, updates regarding the issuance of licenses, the status of hiring investigators, hearing officers, attorneys for all boards, and allocation of costs, complaints, updates on reporting requirements to malpractice insurance companies. And at that time, the HPLO office reported the following regarding the status of hiring investigators, hearing officers, attorneys for all boards, and the allocation of costs. So in their response, they said that investigators, currently the boards conduct their investigations of a case as warranted, and it is within their rules and regulations to do so. The position of investigators needs to be created with specific criteria to meet the board's requirements. We're currently working on those specifications. Attorneys, an RFQ was submitted recently. Both contracts for prosecuting attorney and hearing officer was awarded. And we will be submitting an RFP for full legal services for the boards for long term. On the second oversight on November 15, 2021, the committee focused on the status of FY 2022 revolving fund allocations and the FY 2021 expenditures, the investigation, review, and adjudication of complaints, and the status of rules and regulations and fees and schedules. We discovered that all board members are assigned cases to investigate. No complaints filed between the years of 2018 to 2020 had resulted in a hearing, an adjudication hearing. All boards are receiving the revenues that they brought in, and so the money is available to them relative to the fees that they bring in. The HPLO has the ability to secure a prosecuting attorney and a hearing officer, positions that the HPLO administrator stated to be the most needed for the cases to move forward. HPLO has the ability to obtain review from off-island specialists at the board's discretion. Most of the boards are authorized by statute to promulgate rules and regulations. The Guam Board of Allied Health does have rules and regulations that are in need of updating, and they were working on that and close to finishing at the last oversight hearing in November 2021. In November 2021, the HPLO also confirmed that it had obtained a prosecuting attorney and hearing officer and was issuing an RFQ for those positions. Further confirmed that it was going to meet with the Commission on Healing Arts to review the establishment of an investigator and inspector position in-house and to establish position descriptions. We also discussed the possibility the requirement in the administrative adjudication law that hearing officers be provided by the Attorney General's office. All right, so for this hearing and on February 9, 2022, the Committee on Health sent the following questions to each member of the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners. Please explain GBAHE's process when applicants have records of disciplinary action by boards from other jurisdictions. How many allied health professionals have been granted licenses with prior disciplinary action? And what is the criteria for granting these licenses? How many allied health professionals were approved with conditions set by the board? We also asked, does the board set timelines for investigating complaints? Do outstanding cases get reassigned when members are unable to provide updates due to their schedules? We asked for a complaint investigation and hearing timeline and whether updates are given to the reporting entities or the complainants. And how often they are updated. All right. And so with that said, we're going to begin with testimony from the Guam Board of Allied Health, beginning with the chairperson, Dr. Mamie Balahaja.
Thank you, Speaker. I've submitted to you a written testimony as of late last night or early this morning. And shall I go ahead and recite my writings so that everybody can see? Because you,
yes,
board
please.
members, okay, you have it, and board members have a copy that I sent to them. Okay, so in answering to the first question, for discussion purpose, initial new application generally assigned to the board member licensed in the same profession for review. If the board member is not able to review the application when all the required supportive documents are received, another board member in related profession is asked to do the review so that it's going to be ready for the next meeting. For example, for a new application for a licensed professional counselor, licensed mental health counselor, or marriage and family therapist, I would review any of these applications if board members representing these professions are unable to do so or are not available. This is so that the application is placed on the agenda for the next board meeting for expediency and without delay. When an application shows a record of disciplinary action from other jurisdictions, the reviewing board member immediately flags this to the attention of the chair and the legal counsel. Legal counsel is then alerted to advice and for action. This board is fortunate for not having to be confronted with application having a history of disciplinary problems. Throughout my tenure on this board, we encountered only one applicant who was approved for licensure in last year, 2021, with a prior disciplinary action. The applicant has a previous, quote, consent agreement for violating professional ethics, unquote. This applicant completed her 3 educational units dealing with ethics of multiple clients as required by the previous jurisdiction. Throughout my tenure on this board, there were 2 new applicants that were denied licensure. One applicant with a record of burglary in his younger years was denied licensure. One applicant who was practicing her profession without a Guam license for 1 year in a clinic on Guam was issued an immediate cease and desist order by the board's legal counsel to the applicant and the owner of the clinic. Only one licensee represented by an attorney was disciplined and penalty was issued. The prospect of the board granting licensure when an applicant has prior disciplinary action looks grim and depending on the severity of the violation, in my opinion. It would do good, however, for this board to study this issue and establish some criteria for consideration. So for the question 2, and the discussion is, when a complaint is received against a licensee, a letter is issued to the licensee attaching the complaint, requesting that the licensee reply within 10 working days. When no reply is received from the licensee, another letter is issued for the licensee to respond in 5 working days. If If the licensee has procured an attorney, the legal counsel is then called upon to communicate with the licensee's attorney. As you're aware, the board do not have an investigator, inspector, prosecuting attorney, or hearing officer since May 14, 2015. When a previous Attorney General decided that the Office of the Attorney General was no longer able to provide the legal personnel for the board's cause. As such, some pending disciplinary cases were lingering and languishing since. Due to dismal budget allocated to the Health Professional License Office and procurement difficulties, board members have to take over the role of investigator and conference meetings with complainants and licensees being complained against. This does not include the board member assigned taking time out to write the reports. It is the desire of this board to complete a complaint as soon as possible. No formal hearing has taken place for 6 years by this board. When a complaint is received, a assigned board member, along with a legal counsel and sometimes include the HPLO administrator, meet the complainant and the licensee in separate meetings, of course, to gather information. A report is written up and a recommendation is presented to the board at the next board meeting for action. Complainant and the licensee are then given a letter to explain the board's action. When more information are provided, the complainant for an appeal of the initial decision of the board, another board member may be assigned to review one more time and submit his or her findings to the board for final action. As of date, there's no definite timeline for replying back to the complainant. It is this board's intention to process and avoid delays of any and all complaints against licensees and report back to the complainant in a timely manner. However, in my opinion, setting a time frame is unrealistic based on many factors. For example, there are 12 complaints against veterinarians since 2019. This is all due to not having the proper investigator to investigate and submit reports for the board's action, or not having legal resources to review complaints in order to move them forward. This concludes my writing and submit it to you and committee members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Terlaje, Madam Chair. All right, and I appreciate your testimony in writing this morning. So I did put that as part of our drive for senators to also have. I just want to follow up on as to the ability of the board to set fees and schedules, a fee schedule that is necessary to cover whatever other additional costs you feel you need. Is there a fee schedule being worked on or updated, or are you going to proceed with the current fee schedule?
Madam Speaker, the fee schedule has been looked at, talked about, mulled over, and is going to be presented to you in the package with the rules that we're about to accomplish shortly. The fee schedule will definitely be an increase. Currently, the fee schedule collected by all licensees is not enough even to lease a copy machine. So that's going to come about in the very near future, within the month, on the fee schedule. Yes, we have worked and we have proposed, and we are going to present it to your committee and for yourself for review.
All right, and I appreciate your outlining the time frame of response to complaints or actions on the complaints. And from your recent agenda, for the board's recent agenda, it appears there are 13 cases outstanding from 2015 and 2017 pending investigators, and all of these are against veterinarians. And there are 3 cases pending from 2019 that there are 10 cases from 2020 and 7 from 2021. And so I guess if you could just, I understand that veterinarians that you've said in your testimony that all the cases against veterinarians are pending an investigator. But for the other cases that have been pending as well from 2019, there are 10 from 2020. Is there any impediment to those?
There are many impediments, Madam Speaker. The veterinarian, we are procuring off-island veterinarian because there's a conflict of interest with the current board member, and we don't want, as the case starts, that we don't want any complaint that there's a conflict of interest. So that is being looked at from off-island, a veterinarian from off-island to look at. And once the review has been submitted to HPLO, then we will decide whether to schedule for hearing or not, pending legal counsel's advice to those cases. Now,
Right.
other cases that pending is that we need to continue investigation. And there are several that has already been, let's say, closed. But but those numbers that have been is because either we're procuring or finding off-island individuals to look at it, or we're still in the process of interviewing individuals that complaining, and also getting a report from the licensee. A couple of cases involve obtaining medical records, and that has been a little bit delayed. We have not received it as of yet. So that cannot move on without having the required and proper document for review.
All right, I'm sorry. Let's be more specific. So like I said, from 2015 to 2020, there are 13 cases pending against a veterinarian or veterinarians. So those are all on hold pending investigator, but you said you're procuring the investigator from off-island. There are 3 cases against a respiratory therapist in 2020, September 2020. What is the impediment to those?
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, for what particular?
Respiratory therapist, September 2020, there are 3 cases still pending.
Okay, yeah. Well, what had happened was that the complainant did not indicate the name of the individual depending on the report from a Center for Medical Services. And that is being reviewed as to indicate who that person, because the complaint was against no name.
All right.
The one that has given a name, that is already completed. So
Okay.
we have the result of that already. There are 2 pending RT with no name, and we're still investigating.
All right. Okay. So aside from those, it looks like, if we exclude the cases against veterinarians and those we just discussed against respiratory therapists, it looks like there are only 21 cases pending. There are 7, and I'm just going to read the dates. So they are from April, June, July, September, October, and November. So is there any impediment to the resolution of these cases? Or do you expect them to be completed? Do you expect them to be completed according to your time frame? You said you gave a time frame in your testimony, 10 days for the licensee to respond. And then.
Correct. Let me go through this on the listing that I have, Madam Speaker. On the chiropractor, I think that is being investigated by our chiropractor
Yes.
Board member.
Yeah, and
And
I don't
that's
want to
still-
necessarily talk about each individual case. I just want to know for these cases that are pending for 2021, yeah, is there any impediment to your timely review of them? They've been assigned investigators and then you're supposed to come back to the board. So I just want to know if there's any impediment to that.
I don't believe there's any impediment of, I don't think so, but we're still waiting for individual to put in their time into hurry up with the case and write it up.
Okay, you mean the individual board members?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. And for the pending cases, have licenses been renewed for all of these licensees?
Yes, they've been renewed for before, they've been renewed in March as of the deadline 2021, because that is the deadline set last year for renewal. But some of the cases prior, yes, all of them have been renewed.
All right, but it is within the jurisdiction of the board to hold a renewal of licensees pending investigation of these complaints?
No, it is not the practice of the board to do so.
Is it within your power?
It could be, but we have not exercised that particular power to withdraw or suspend a license without going through the proper procedure and the process. So all in all is that none of them has been withhold the license to practice.
All right, have you approved any licenses with conditions?
No, we've not, according to my memory.
All right. Okay, I'd like to ask the other board members if they have anything that they'd like to ask, how this hearing works. So I'd like to ask you if you have anything else you'd like to add, particularly as to your, use of discretion in reviewing license applications, in reviewing complaints, and exercising your discretion in those areas. And after that, I'm going to ask my colleagues if they have any questions for any of you. I guess I'll begin with the vice chair, Mr. Peretta. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I'm not sure what to add. I think Mamie pretty much summarized the process that the board undertakes whenever it receives any kind of complaint from the public. We respond in an expeditious manner to see that we can resolve these complaints as soon as possible. But as you know, we do have hindrances in terms of lack of resources, and this often delays that process, but we do the best we can given our resources.
Can you be specific? What do you mean lack of resources is delaying your process?
Well, we don't have a current investigator, for example, and if a board member has to do the investigation, then that often is a problem because it has to be determined whether the board member can act appropriately in terms of being impartial and no conflict of interest. And if there is a conflict of interest, then that board member can no longer be involved in that case. Fortunately, that rarely happens. That doesn't happen too often, but that's a problem. The other thing is, in addition to the investigator, we often don't have the necessary resources to fully investigate these cases in terms of the needed help or assistance that we need. And so this often delays that process.
Well, I'm hoping that that's being resolved. We see now that you're able to obtain investigators from off island. We've seen the other boards also do that. We've talked to HPLO, who said that they were also going to try to establish a position within HPLO as an investigator. And so I hope that you as board members will follow up with that and make that an urgent priority. But thank you, Mr. Peretta. Dr. Miller?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to the testimony by the board?
I think Dr. Balahaja and Mr. Preda are covering it really well. I'd just like to add that just the busyness of our Assistant Attorney General, he was just in trial representing the board and the medical board at the same time for a lawsuit. So that's where some of these complaints just got pushed back because it was just a lack of manpower from the AG's office too. But I'd like to see a system where rather than getting deep into legal action, we can just sit down with these complainants and then the licensees and just try to work it out. But there's always a legal issue, you know, like for instance, if I was to go and talk to a chiropractor and say, hey, we're hearing this, I have to make sure that I have the proper training from the AG to make sure I don't compromise anything legally. So I think that's probably where part of the problem is. Like, for instance, the current complaint against the chiropractors, actually 2 chiropractors involved, I think can be resolved pretty quickly. And I think we can get it resolved pretty quickly just by sitting down and talking rather than going through a whole filing, you know, a lawsuit or something like that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to that and the rules and regulations, perhaps that that type of procedure is addressed so that it's consistent. Mr. Chong? Or Mr. Chong, is there anything else you'd like to add to the testimony on by the board?
Like other members already mentioned that we have a lack of manpower, and beside that, you know, other board members are working also. Sometimes, you know, they work on the HPLO. So hopefully we have more manpower, also support from the government to solve this problem. Also, instead of going to the lawsuit, maybe have some, you know, board members to solve the problem before going law case.
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, the board is actually, not, this is not the lawsuit stage. You know, there may be separate lawsuits, but the board is just a licensing and adjudication of the licensing. But I'm just trying to make sure we are, I guess, that I'm understanding which policies that we can affect here on the licensing boards, within the licensing board's authority. Again, so we talked about manpower and resources and the ability of the board to set its own fees and to use the fees that it brings in for its purposes. And in fact, it's mandated as one of the powers of the board to do that it's responsible for the regulation. So it must be adjusting its fees accordingly. But Mr. Chong, government support, maybe if you could just clarify a little bit more what you mean by that.
You know, like, for example, we have only one legal counsel is dealing with the other board, like, for example, medical board, dental board, you know. So he's so busy, he cannot handle all those, you know, all. Plus, you know, we have, I believe that more than 12 professions in our board. So handling each case, each different profession is too much for the, you know, our counselor, you know, legal counselor. So I think Guam maybe provide more legal counselor. Maybe that's we can, you know, work more specific problems, can solve the problems.
All right, I appreciate that. That was also brought up at the last oversight hearing, and we discussed the AG's allocation of resources for this board. It is, we will follow up again on that. Ms. Crisostomo?
Yes, I admire Mamie Galahad's response to your questions. They were really right on. I just wanted to reinforce that when the previous AG took away our ability to tap into the AG's office to protect us from things that really put the kibosh on a lot of things. So, as far as the fees are concerned, we are working on them. Whether it's going to cover legal fees or not, that's another question that we really have to tackle. But otherwise, I am in full agreement with what previous people
Frozen
said.
try. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I was frozen for a while there, but thank you very much, Ms. Crisostomo. I heard your testimony and all right, I think I've got all the board members. Unless there's any there with you, Mamie? No, okay, so I will now like to open it for my colleagues, and after that, we will hear from one of the public who signed up to testify, Mr. Lebowski. But right now, I'll ask my colleagues if they have questions for the board. Beginning with the Vice Chair, Senator Perez.
Students Masi, Madam Speaker. Yeah, I'm just listening to all the recommendations, and I know from the last hearing there was the issue with getting some, I guess, attorney to hear the complaints, and so I see there is some progress in that, and you know, I think definitely want to support that. I guess the question I have is, what are the SOPs currently in regards to handling complaints? And do you think that there's a need to update the laws in addition to the regulations? Do you see there's a need to update laws? For instance, you had a complainant where they didn't mention who the professional was. I mean, do you see us helping out in modifying any of the statutes currently? This can go for Dr. Balhaja and any of the members.
Yes, Senator Paris. That, to answer your question, that is being worked on feverishly. We have many work group, and we're doing another one Friday. So on items that has been worked on, and the fee schedule has been already done. So it's going to be in a packet to be given in a packet with the rules and regulation that our legal counsel has guided us through, and it's already almost done. And also then the next thing attaching to, according to him, to the rules will be amendment to the current law that will reflect on the rules as well. So that will be a package coming down to the legislature for your review and action, I'm hoping.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll definitely be looking forward to that. And thank you for all your hard work. Yeah, I don't have any questions right now. I'll just continue to listen. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you so much, Senator Paris. Vice Chair, Minority Leader, Senator Dueñas.
Students Masi, Madam Chair, and once again, thank you to everyone who's present today. Yeah, I mean, obviously there has been, quite a bit of media coverage on this issue, on these issues, and I think it's important that following on what Senator Perez and of course the questions that have been answered that have been submitted by the committee, I think the issue of investigators and the ability to do this process efficiently is something that's of utmost importance. I'm hearing that we're waiting on the fee schedule and the like, but I don't know that gives, a strong level of comfort from those who may be needing the services of the board. So I guess I would just ask straight away, I mean, it seems like we're in the budget process. It seems like it might make sense to give you the resources you need to operate efficiently pending, that opportunity. Chairwoman Balhaja, could you address that? If that's the impediment, I really think that we need to move forward and do more in this area instead of waiting on the fee schedule.
Yes, Senator. You're correct. I think that with the assistant and looking the importance of all the boards, not just the Allied Health Board, and HPLO is very important to this island. It's just that it's just one of the many government Guam agency try to serve the public. And the main reason why we all exist is protect the public. And I think that, and to say with the resources we have, it's far from protecting the public because of lack of resources. One thing the legislature can do is to appropriate certain amount to the Office of HPLO for the purpose of supporting all the board's duties and responsibilities as required by law. I can tell you that even with the fee schedule that we have worked on and will be submitted, that's still only comprised with a small percentage of the operation of this office, the HPL office. And our treasurer had worked on the treasury report, and what she found was that the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners bringing in the money only is 13% of the operation, overall operation of the Allied Health, of the Health Professional Licensing Office. So there has to be some working into how to make this HPLO into a viable and resourceful agency to protect the public, because they are, in a sense, protecting the public when they're able to support all the boards. So when it comes to the budget, I'm talking about all the boards. I'm not talking about just Guam Board of Allied Health. We just want small fraction of overall boards, right? So that has been, I've been struggling with this, actually, to tell you the truth, for many years. And it's still, I don't know. I mean, I have no authority to
if I may, I mean, we're talking about licensure, right? I mean, you're right, Mamie, in terms of other boards, but most of the other boards utilize the institution, because that's the assets that they have. An airport board has, you know, all the assets of the institution. Guam Housing has all the assets of the institution. With your board, I'm a little concerned, because it sounds like what's been happening is that it's been relying on the membership of the board. And it seems like a collateral duty to those people who really have busy lives otherwise. And it just seems like if we're going to have this expectation, and the public's going to have this expectation that, you know, the ability to police and the, you know, licensure is key to anything, right, in the profession. And that's why I think we're trying to be fair here by saying, you know, we're staying in the confines of your duty and your area. I think the speaker has been very clear about that. But I think that if it's going to, you know, I would like to look at other models. That would be hard pressed to find other models whereby you really have a collateral duty to the board to do this investigating and all this requirement to come out with findings and the like to address, you know, whether or not licensure is going to be continued or even investigation. So I'm a little concerned about that. And I want to make sure that, you know, I want to hear from every board member, really, honestly. My only key question I have is, do you feel that this process is, you're equipped to do your job, and is it really fair and comparable in other jurisdictions to really have this collateral duty aside from addressing licensure when you know, an application's come before you? You have to do whatever due diligence to make that decision. This investigation and recommendations for renewal, in my humble opinion, just seems seems a lot without the investigator or engaters, you know, plural, to make this an efficient, proper process. So I'd like to hear from each board member whether or not you feel as though this is currently doable under the current circumstances.
Senator Duenas, let me plug in. I'm referring to all boards means only the licensure boards within the Health Professional Licensing Office. I'm not referring to other boards and commissions, you know, that are autonomous, just all the licensing boards, health licensing boards. Yes, I'm glad you brought this up, because I think that this put a compromise and a problem for board members when they have to do the investigating of complaints. I'll give you an example. For me, I'm doing the investigation. I will not be voting on the disposition of the complaint or the case. So that put one vote behind So I don't know what to say. I think that it puts a lot of work, a lot of burden on us, on members, board members, having to do multiple tasks and to present for a justified action or opinion into the case. The one thing that I think that is we're fortunate is that we have a legal counsel who is really, really dedicated with experience in helping boards in the past and currently for many years. And so he's been guiding us into a direction that avoid any mishap or another lawsuit or whatever. So, but yes, we are overtasked. The office here at HPL is overtasked because we don't have the resources. So a staff member have to take at least 2 boards or several other boards. And we're a big board. Medical board is a big board. You know, other boards are pretty big. So you're talking about handling the other health professionals on the island. So I don't know what to say, except that being that we are committed to providing a licensure in the best means and vetting applicants, we're doing the best we can.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I won't take up much more time. Of course, I'm sure there's our other questions if any other member wants to jump in, but I think we really have to take a look at this. If and maybe even just a peer review against another similar jurisdiction, with similar size and medical professionals and the investigative capabilities and the like, because it just seems like, that has to be a very strong part of what's going on. And I like the fact that you mentioned that your legal counsel now is guiding you and giving you the proper assistance. That has to be paramount within the work that you have to do. And so I just look forward to working with the committee a little closer on, if we know already that the fee schedule is designed to establish, the strength within the organization. And as you said, maybe throughout the entire organization as a whole and the different boards, if that's the case, well, we may have to bridge that gap to make sure that caseloads are handled properly, it's done, and do something in the meantime to give the public the confidence that the review is there. And so just one other question, maybe, there's been a lot of discussion, and I just want to get it from the board perspective. There's been a lot of discussion on public participation. Is that a case-by-case basis, or it's how you handle your meetings in terms of as per the protocols? How does it work with public participation when the meetings are held?
There is, which is then, the meetings. We, in our agenda, we have not put public participation while we're doing face-to-face in the past, that individual attend the board meeting, they're acknowledged by me to give to give their comments or concerns that may have. So there is the staff are giving me the policy governing to address the board. They submit a request to the board, and we will acknowledge it. But currently, because of the streaming and Zooming, the limited time, they are not. But they can put it in writing to our attention, and we will answer that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted. Yeah. Yeah. I just think it's important. Yeah. Since it's come up and it's it's something that the public is discussing. I think it's just important that that it's clear the policy, and that is based on a request, based on how the meeting is conducted on that evaluation. I just think it's important so that's that disclosure is there in terms of how this process is supposed to work. I know that in other meetings, of course, like you said, this is particular to the the craft of medicine, but in other meetings, I mean, there that is a feature, right? So I think that there may be some some expectation, and I just think it was important to get this on the record.
Yes, they can submit in writing what they'd like to bring it up, and we will acknowledge that. It will be in writing. Yeah.
That's all I have for now, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to ask some questions.
Senator, may I ask
It's,
you to,
Ms. Crisostomo? Have a-
Speaker?
I just-
Sorry. Sorry, I'm sorry. Mamie, is that you talking? Were you adding something?
Yes, Speaker,
Dr. Balhajit?
yeah, to add what we were discussing with the Senator Duenas, could you acknowledge Brianna Sablan, HPLO staff acting administrator here?
Sure. Let me get to Sybil Crisostomo first. She's had her hand up. Ms. Crisostomo, member of the board.
Yes, I also would like to request that many, many years ago, well, in our law, it says that the funds go into a general fund for the board. Many, many years ago, somebody took those funds out of the board without or even knowing it. And I was hoping that we could in some way secure the funds that are brought in by the board, that they stay there for the board. That's my comment.
Yeah, thank you. Since I became health chair, that's one of the first issues that we addressed and made sure that every board, in fact, in those days, were not even aware of how much funds they were entitled to. So I've tried to make it very clear with working with public health. You are entitled to all the fees you bring in. Those are yours. You decide whether you're going to spend it on a prosecuting attorney, an investigator, a conflicts counsel, a hearings officer, or anything like that. It's the boards that have to authorize that. Is Brianna Sablan from the HPLO office? Can you bring the camera closer to you? Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Brianna Sablan, the acting HPLO administrator. Senator Duenas, I just wanted to clarify your request or your question about the public's participation. With the newly implemented Public Law 36-34 that mandated the posting or advertising of our publication, our board meeting agenda. With that, we have an internal policy that requires the public to request in writing, to write a request in writing for any participation in the meeting. So I wanted that, we are able to address the public, but we would like it in writing so that the board will have that for review and approval prior to the meeting. Because we do have to, although the law states that we do have to publish our for open government law, the 5-day and the 48 hours, with our current vendor, newspaper publication vendors, they require 7 days. So we do need to kind of finalize it, and we do an internal deadline in 10 days. So that's why we kind of ask the public to write, give us in writing a request 10 days prior to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brianna Sablan from the HPLO office. All right, now I'm going to recognize Senator Taitigui. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the HPLO board members that are here today. Appreciate it. And I guess that answered my question. Ms. Sablan, I was wondering who was the administrator or the assistants from Public Health to assist the HPLO office. And I'm glad to see that you're here today. I think Zenny takes care of the Board of Medical Examiners. So I'm sorry,
Senator Taitigui. Let me recognize the members of the HPLO who are here today. So Zenia C. Pacina, she is the administrator of the HPLO office, Health Professional Licensing Office. Brianna Sablan is the acting HPLO administrator today, I believe. And Rosemary Carmen is the HPLO staff. Sienna Galindo is another HPLO staff. And they also have attorney Robert Weinberg, who's an assistant attorney general as the board's legal counsel for all of the licensing boards.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that information. So, Memi, when was the last time the rules and regulations and fee was adjusted?
I'm sorry to inform you, Senator, it was in December 1998.
1998?
Yes.
Is there anything in the rules or regulations to require the board to revisit it, rules, regulations, and fees within a certain time period?
I think it's within the statute that said so. We did try it about 2, 3 years ago, there was a lot of opposition to fee increase, and we were told that what is the money used for? So out of that, legal counsel advised us to establish a position of treasurer among the board members with all boards, so that they can work and look into it as to how to go about establishing fee schedule. And the fee schedule, we looked at, board member was assigned, Sybil Crisostomo, board member assigned to look at other jurisdictions as to what are the fees and renewal fees for each of the profession that we regulate. So the fees were based on those criteria as well, and how other jurisdiction collects.
Okay, but is there anything, Memi, in the Memi or Balahaja, it's easier to say Balahaja,
Okay.
it's Memi, Memi. Is there anything in the law that indicates the board's requirement to revisit rules and regulations and fee, like every 5 years, every 10 years, like that?
No, there's no indicating of exact years. It's just that that the board is given the authority to promulgate rules and establish fee schedule.
Okay. Maybe what about any federal regulations that's required in this type of line of profession that you follow? Is there anything that you have to incorporate into the body when it comes to renewals or even licensures that you look to the federal regulations, or even reports from other jurisdictions when you're reviewing an applicant?
I can talk about clinical psychology because I have reports from American Psychological Association with the Psychological Association with other jurisdictions, as well with Association of State Regulatory Board that I seek guidance from, and I read and I receive regular emails from them. And we are a member of the Regulatory Board of Psychology. In order for us to approve applicants to take the psychology exam. So I look at what other jurisdictions are doing, that there's a communication among everybody. Mm-hmm. So we always look at other jurisdiction and guidance, perhaps in the Region 9 area, which is Hawaii, California, Oregon, Washington, what they're doing as well.
Okay, well, maybe
that doesn't mean only them.
Yeah. Maybe I can ask Ms. Sablon from HPLL office with regards to, are you familiar with any type of federal, guidance or reports that you can look like a data bank when reviewing licensures or renewals? Is there a guidance that you follow?
Sorry.
This is for Ms. Sablon, HPLO office.
You have a database.
Maybe just talked about now on the psychologist side of it, the spectrum, but you cover all kinds of everything from chiropractors to acupuncturists to other entity, nursing home facilities, things like that.
Senator Titleje?
Yes, yes.
This is Zena. Actually, Brianna is acting HBO administrator since I was detailed as the chief public health officer.
I see now. I didn't recognize you.
But I can answer that question. So the office staff at HBLO doesn't obtain that information. They do obtain that information, but they do not provide that information to the board members. The board members are responsible for their regulations, rules and regulations based on federal and local laws. So as much as the HBLO, we provide them resources available to them to make those decisions if changes are needed to be made within their purview, within their specialty. So, so each of their specialties is actually responsible to look at what federal guidelines are established and new laws that are out there and in their profession, and then make those changes accordingly. Of course, in a collaboration with the legislature, since we need to vet that through you guys, through the senators.
It was Senator Therese that brought up the SOPs, which I thought was very important to bring up, while you're moving toward rules and regulations, that there is a standard operating procedure in place right now. And one of them is to review the applicants thoroughly, not just on Guam, but abroad too as well. So that answers the background. So 1998 was the last time. Are you having any problems, maybe with hiring investigators, or is it a funding issue?
I think it's a funding issue.
Okay, so there's no issue on that. Okay. Working on the rules and my last question, Madam Chair, working on the rules and regulations, are you engaged with the Attorney General's office? I've noticed in one board, what they're doing, I think it's the social workers, what they're doing is they're putting all their rules and regulations together without interruption of an attorney, because it can get very combobulated and, their mind is off somewhere else. But are you working just on these rules and regulations without the Attorney General? And then once that's completed, you provide it to the Attorney General, or is it in tandem?
No, Senator, we are working very, very, very closely with our legal counsel, who's providing the guidance and who's actually the keeper of all the notes and all the agreement as to what it is from each of our board members. So he's our guiding person into doing that. And I think that will be a little bit lost without his guidance and informing us what is, how to go about writing in a language that will be acceptable, So yes, we are working very closely with him.
Well, okay, thank you, Mimi, for that. And I think we need to light a fire under somebody's feet, because what you said, you've been working on this for how many years? And the last time it was changed was in 1998. That's quite a bit of time to not have these rules and regulations in place. So it's been some time, and I know you keep saying we're going to bring this to the legislature very soon, but I would feel more comfortable, and if you're comfortable, to give me a time. Is it going to be in 3 months? 1 month, 2 months, or next year?
No, within a month and a half. The reason why is because we have, all the board members are very busy in the clinic, and so for me to schedule meeting so that they come and on their own, they can look at the rules and send it to our legal counsel. I'm sorry that it takes so long. I think that is incredible that it took so long to do, is because the task is something that you really have to encourage and push board members to participate, that they contribute their own profession in this whole document. It is not the same like a social work board, a medical board, that is just one concentration of a profession. We're talking about 15 boards into one entity. So that little bit difficult.
I understand the difficulty in it, and I appreciate all the hard work that everybody puts in and your time spent on it. But it really needs to be done, because it may address some of the issues and concerns they have in the public on how to move forward to bring complaints toward the board. So thank you, Mimi, and to the board again for being here, and of course to the HPLO office for all your hard work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Taitzagui. Senator Frank Blas Jr., you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to all the board members that are here. I listened intently the different issues, and there's a couple of questions. First off, I'm a little uneasy in as far as how long it's been taking for things to move forward, and recognizing the enormity and the size of the board in itself. And maybe, the makeup of the board was good at the time that it was made up. Have we gone past that, or have we evolved into now the necessity to actually, for lack of a better term, maybe break up the board into more tighter or more aligned disciplines than it is now to help alleviate or some of the concerns? I mean, I I've heard many discussions before from many of the professionals that actually align or have to adhere or be a part of this board, the Allied Health Board, and sometimes it's like, okay, as a veterinarian, I'm going to rely on a cosmetologist to make the decision for me, or as a chiropractor, I'm going to have another individual who knows nothing about my profession to be able to make decisions. So I guess it's an open question to the board members. Is this something that, in looking at possibly now breaking up this board and then creating now boards that are more aligned to the disciplines, is it time, or is it necessary? And I'll open it up. Dr. Miller.
There's a couple of ways that the board could probably operate more efficiently. For instance, there's been talk of the podiatrists and the physician's assistants to move over to the medical board because their surgical arts, it seems like a good place for them. Matter of fact, in the 90s, we also licensed the osteopathic physicians, and they finally got moved over to the medical board. Downside of that, I'm not sure the podiatrists want to be on the medical board. That's just a political issue. There was another idea too, is that we have enough licenses in the psychological arts, so the 3 counseling professions and then clinical psychology, for them to start their own board. On the other side of the issue, we have several small professions. Like, we could not have a podiatry board because there's only 4 podiatrists currently on Guam. I might be wrong, there might be 5, but that's not enough to make a board. And so same with acupuncture, there's probably less than 15 acupuncturists right now. We have maybe just 12 chiropractors. So it would be nice to have our own board, like as a chiropractor, but at the same time, it's just not practical, And then that's one way. But if you were to break up the board, I'm not quite sure what you'd be able to do and how that would reflect with the HPLO. Would you just triple their load, or would you have to go back and redo rules and regulations? Because we have general rules and regulations that apply to all 15 boards. Then you have specific rules and regulations for each of the professions. So that would probably create a bit of havoc if you broke the whole board up. But yeah, moving some of the professions around might be a good idea. The big professions, like I just said, psychology could, I think, support their own board. So that's one idea.
Okay. And I bring this up because, again, how many different professions are governed by this board?
I believe 15. Is that right, Madam Chair?
15.
Amy?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Dr. Miller, you bring up a point, and as far as it may be impractical to be able to break up some of this membership based on discipline, or a specific discipline, because there may not be enough practitioners, to be governed by a board. However, if there was a way to be able to categorize the different disciplines into more specific areas, this is up for discussion. I'm just listening to issues, and quite honestly, these are some of the issues that I remember that existed when I was the health chair, back in the 29th Guam legislature. Okay. And there were strides, and there were things that obviously that they were working on back then, that were put in place. But again, as the decade has passed, because it's been more than a decade since then, some of the issues unfortunately still remain unresolved. They still look like they're unresolved, and some issues are new ones based on now the expansion, and basically the disciplines that exist. And I'm just bringing this out for a discussion to see whether what other solutions we can provide or possible solutions we can put on the table to see if we can help resolve, the issue that exists today. So I thank you very much, Dr. Miller, on that.
You're welcome.
Dr. Mamie, you had something that you wanted to say?
Yeah, Senator, I think the composition of all the boards currently under Allied Health have been, yes, you're correct, have been talked about and mulled about for many years. But in my opinion, right now, we have no resources to support all the means to function, for all the boards to function properly and according to the law. And HPLO needs a lot more resources than what they have right now. Going back to the number of boards, the reason why this was all put together as Allied Health, because some discipline or some profession only have a few people.
Sure.
So to make them a board is like having all the licensee in one profession to be board members. How many you're supposed to have to make a board member? At least 3, right? To be not 2, but at least 3. I'm just assuming, okay? So that's like all of them or half of the whole population of that profession. So that is a problem. Another on top of that is that the current law says that you cannot have a board when there's less than 10 licensees in the profession. Okay, and that particular section could be looked at if the legislature desired to break up the board. But as of right now, I don't advise to be so. The problem is not the board professions of the board, is the resources necessary to support the boards and giving resources to HPLO. That's my opinion. And let me talk about psychology. There are currently 18 licensed. Half of them are off island. They're renewing. They don't practice on Guam. They were on Guam, but half of them are off island licensee, continue to want to have a Guam license. Having a Guam license, could be very attractive to other licensee off island. You know what I mean? Oh, I'm licensed on Guam. So that would be a problem. But I think to break up the boards might be a good idea. Currently with LPC, the Licensed Professional Counselor, there's like 70 some people. There's 70 some licensees. So that's quite a bit to handle. But Vince Pereda and Nadine Cepeda and that profession and myself, we help each other into looking at applications. So that has not been a problem. Vince, you want to say something? I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to.
No, that's just fine. Thank you. Mr. Perez?
No, the only thing I'd like to add with that is I represent counselors, and currently the board licenses 3 types of counselors: licensed professional counselors, licensed mental health counselors, and licensed marriage and family therapists. Now, collectively, we total about, like Mamie said, about 70 people that are licensed counselors under those 3 separate categories. So if you're going to take a look at the numbers in terms of justifying a separate board, I certainly believe that the counselors can have its own board because we have the numbers. There was also another discussion that was made earlier that why not somehow merge the social work board with the counselor board, because a lot of the functions of the counselors are very similar to the social workers. Clinical social workers do the same counseling as the counselors under the Board of Allied Health. And so why not consider some type of merger? That's been one discussion. So there has been discussions in the past about creating a separate board for the counselors because of the numbers.
Okay, well, thank you, and I appreciate it. And the reason why I bring this up, and please, I mean no offense to anybody, but my concern is, and I'm very interested in the conversations that we're having and the questions and answers that that are taking place here. And the one question that came to my mind is, if we didn't have this hearing, how would this have been brought to light so that we can recognize just the enormity of the issue? Because it is problematic. And so my concern is, if we didn't have this hearing, when were we going to know about this? and what was being done to be able to address it, from the executive branch level. So I'm going to continue to listen and to hear, and I appreciate the conversations. Again, as the one-time chair many years ago, over a decade ago, for this, and to hear that some of these issues continue to exist. Maybe let's look at other options that we failed or we refused to put on the table, and let's look at it now. One of them being, maybe it's time that some of those disciplines that are being governed by this board, maybe it's time you go off on your own now, and so that we have a more manageable board, so that maybe in as far as some of the issues and the concerns that you have, it can be more focused, based on who these disciplines are, and these that are governed by this board. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker. Very much. I'll continue to listen.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Senator Joanne Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I certainly also appreciate the discussion, but I kind of concur with the points raised by Senator Blas. This has been a long-standing issue, and I hate to think that the only reason it's being brought to light is because there's public discussion about complaints being made in the community, and yet, there's a feeling that they're not getting the response or things done in a timely manner. I don't know what the configurations of the boards will be best. I guess maybe we could look at that. I mean, we want to make sure they have the resources, but I understand. I mean, May Belha just brought up the fact that everybody's busy and understandable, the type of work that they do and the demand for their services. Yet at the same time, we require that the Allied Board exist for a specific purpose. And those purposes are all related to the work that everyone is busy doing. So I think we certainly would want some comfort level moving forward that those key issues be addressed. I mean, I'm glad to hear they have an Assistant Attorney General that's working with them. But obviously there's a need to increase the amount of activity with the Allied Board in terms of the work they're doing. If it's an investigator that they need, is the workload, maybe I can ask, maybe if that's the case, is the workload significant enough, or issues being brought before the board significant enough that a full-time investigator would be needed and available to do the work? Because obviously it's hard for you to preside over making a decision about a case, and then at the same time, even though you did mention, if you investigate the case yourself, you would not vote on it, but that's really not the purpose of your role in the board. So I just want to get your feedback. I mean, is the workload to the degree that a full-time investigator would be needed?
Yes, Senator Brown, thank you. Yes, in my opinion, it is a full-time investigator is required for the office here. And I'm talking about that would be enough work for not only Ally Health, but the other boards.
And you currently, do you have one now, or is it just if an issue comes up, you as a board member, or maybe gets assigned to another board member that might have a specialty in a particular area to perform the investigation work? How is that addressed? Or how has that been addressed?
Right now, the investigator is being assigned to who would be, if there's a conflict of interest in a particular board member, then usually I take over and decide who would be. But mostly I would assist in expediting complaints.
But you don't have an investigator that is an employee of the board that actually will be tasked to go out and independently investigate any complaints that are made now? Or
That's
have you
correct.
ever historically, has the board ever had an investigator at all, or
No,
it's simply
never.
done by the board members?
If I can recall, yeah,
okay.
no.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that's something, I mean, we've recently heard about the appeals board and the issues there, unfortunately, but the appeals board has a full-time investigator to address those licensing requirements for those professionals. So maybe that's something that can be looked at. I mean, nobody wants to see increased fees, but I think to protect the interests of the profession as well, that might be worth it, is to address that. Nobody wants to, I don't like addressing increase of fees, but, long term, especially if you end up, right, not you in particular, but, let's say I was a medical professional and a complaint gets raised against me. I would want to make sure that there's a process in place in my interest as well to, if it's a serious allegation, is it true or not? I'm going to want to see that be addressed and reach some conclusion as well, because, you know, if that's my profession and my reputation is dependent upon that for my patients, I would, you know, want that done properly. And also if I'm a member of the community and I'm filing a complaint because of something that, you know, I may not have thought was proper or professional with a medical doctor or someone that I was dealing with as a, you know, being a patient, I would want to know what the recourse is and what the resolution is to that. And, you know, you're assuming, and we're assuming that people will make a complaint because they have a legitimate concern or reason. You know, you won't think that people would do it just to get back at someone or they're upset with somebody, and, you know, that they would, but people do that. You know, that's the reality. That's the sad reality out there. It does happen. But as a community, we need to have a process in place that those issues can be reviewed and properly addressed so that we all get to move on. And if something's wrong, correct it. If you know, a licensed professional is not properly performing their duties or stepping out of that and abusing it, then by all means, we want to see that that's effectively and efficiently dealt with in a timely manner. So, I mean, I understand everybody's busy, but I think the time has come that we can't just let things continue on as they have, and actually address what can be done to effectively put in place an operating board that has the ability to address complaints, have the resources. And again, we don't have unlimited resources, but at least to put the basic structure in place so that access is available. Because ultimately, for both the interests of the medical professions and also for the members of our community, I think that's very important. I mean, normally the work that you all do is related to either our physical body or our mind. You know, that's as personal as you can get. So I think we need to address that, because I think the time's come. We cannot allow this to languish as it has all these many years, and just, you know, people are just trying to juggle the best they can. I think our community deserves better than that. So I don't have any other questions, Madam Speaker, but definitely I'm sure if your leadership and oversight on these issues, we can seek some resolution. If it is addressing fees with regards to this, and perhaps that's what needs to be looked at, because I think making that investment would be more worthwhile than to continue where we're at now, where I just foresee more problems being created and the inability of the board without these resources at their disposal to actually function properly and perform the work that we desire and intend for them to do. I mean, I want the board members to oversee properly and execute that with the time they have, and to actually be the ones to go out and you know, do the investigation and other matters related to that. So with that, Madam Chair, I don't have any further comments, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. I believe that's all the senators right now. I know Mr. Lebowski is going to testify next, but before we move on from this discussion on fees, I just want to reiterate that you know, the appropriation that's been made to the HPLO office is from the HPLO revolving fund, which comes from fees that the boards are individually mandated to adjust in order to meet their mandates. And they all acknowledged at our last oversight hearing that this is their authority and responsibility to ensure that these fees are adequate to do so. We also, during budget hearings, confirmed that it was public health, and the HPL office is underneath public health. Of course, it's a division of public health, and that public health only requested $252,782 for HPLO. And in fact, we appropriated $296,921. And that's since in the last few years only, because it was not done before, that the boards have focused and authorized HPLO on their behalf to consolidate and consolidate funds from the different boards and hire counsel to prosecute the cases, to hire conflicts counsel, to hire hearing officers, because the AG's office decided in 2015 not to provide hearings officers anymore. And we have followed up with the Director of Public Health as to why that is allowed to happen, and whether, and it was my understanding at that time that he was going to discuss with the Attorney General's office resuming of the hearing officers, which would save these boards money, so that they could procure whatever else it is that they deem necessary. And again, this is the responsibility of each board to determine what it is that is necessary. And at the last the last oversight hearing, the HPLO office very clearly said that they were discussing the hiring of an investigator, and they were going to determine whether one was sufficient for all of the boards. And they kind of, I thought, speculated that that might be possible, and that no one at that hearing said we needed one investigator for our board alone. In fact, even the medical licensing board has not said that. But I do acknowledge that this board is a very big board with very different members. And this is the first I'm hearing of your proposals to break it up. I think if you are serious about that, then please submit those in writing to me. I will consider all proposals to do that. But I also am concerned that breaking up boards and creating more boards is really going to put a burden on those who licensees to support the work of those boards. In other words, you're going to have to raise fees on all of your licensees in order to fund, a different investigator for every single board, especially after you break them up into multiple boards. And that was not necessary according to the last hearing, that they were still able to consolidate use of these attorneys, the investigators, and everything else that they were going to hire at that point. And I acknowledge that I want to thank you, board members, for the work that you're doing on a volunteer basis. So I understand that for years you have been doing the investigations yourself with the assistance of the Attorney General, who is assisting you with investigations, and that's why he's conflicted out of being the prosecutor or the hearings officer, in the end, or further down the case. So you do have that assistance to you. Again, we will follow up again with the Director of Public Health as to the allocation of attorneys for all of these boards. We went through at the last oversight hearing, the amount of funds and the balances, the amount of funds allocated for FY22 for each of the boards. And I think Allied Health is one of the larger ones, medical board, nursing, and then Allied Health, if I remember correctly. But so I'm just worried that, breaking that up into smaller pots is really going to put a huge burden on your licensees to increase their fees. But otherwise, merging for other reasons, we can consider that. But this is the first those proposals have been made, and I don't think that necessarily addresses how fast complaints can be addressed. And that's the issue of this public hearing today, and that is how fast can we address complaints. You've testified already that of all the 23 cases that I count that are still pending, 11 of these were from prior years for against veterinarians, and that you have now secured an investigator off island for veterinarian cases because of conflict. Otherwise, the local veterinarians on your board would have done the investigation, but they've claimed conflict. So the other ones are, we're assuming will be reported at the next hearing, the ones that were complained of in 2021. And then yet we still have the three respiratory therapist complaints made in September 2020. Those are 2020. You're saying there were issues with the complaint itself, but that was September 2020. It's February 2022 right now. So I just think I'm imploring all of you board members who are here today to please take note of that, and please do whatever is possible within your authority. And if you review the authority of this board, it's really very broad. And I think the concern of the public is whether we are having people licensed continuing with their license while the investigations of these complaints are being delayed. If they were being addressed promptly, then I understand we don't, suspend their license because we are addressing the complaints promptly. But when they're not being addressed from 2020 or, even prior, then that's concerning. All right, and so now I'm going to hear from Mr. David Lebowski, who's also signed up to testify. Mr. Lebowski.
Thank you, Speaker. And my name is David Lebowski. Thank you for holding this important oversight hearing on the Guam Board of Health Examiners. Let me first start off by saying that I think there's sort of a disconnect here, and this wasn't in my original testimony, but we're here because of consumers and consumers' complaints regarding the Allied Board. But there's no consumers that can give that are giving testimony here beside me for the board to be able to respond to. But it's not just consumers that have complaints regarding the Allied Board. It goes beyond that. This past week, Dr. Samuel Freeman, he's the director of the Cancer Center of Guam. He stated this past week in the Guam Post, if we had functional licensing bodies here, neither one, and he's referring to a medical negligence case that he gave expert testimony, neither one, a doctor or physician assistant that he gave testimony against, neither one would be allowed to continue seeing patients alone until the credentials were reevaluated and they undergo serious scrutiny and possible reexamination. Speaker, as you just alluded to when you said these people have negligence complaints against them, but continue to participate in the community. And that's Dr. Samuel Freeman's experience, and he stated that in the newspaper. The key words here are functioning boards, referring to the Allied Board and of course also the Medical Examiners Board. Presently, physician assistants, which was involved in Dr. Freeman's case, or anyone that's covered by the Allied Board, can basically harm the consumer, walk free to the next patient, as Dr. Freeman refers to, putting us all at risk. There's nothing to prevent it. Dr. Freeman also went on to say that the very basics of medical care, medical surveillance, and proper action by responsible authorities on Guam should be established before anything else. Again, referencing the lack of functional license boards. We have heard the same thing over and over regarding Guam's licensing boards. You've heard it from me, you've heard it from frustrated consumers, you've heard it from doctors like Dr. Freeman and other doctors also, including Dr. Yasuhiro, who during his legislative testimony in the past discussed these license governing boards. The need for impartial reviews of complaints was stressed by Dr. Yasuhiro, which would offset many of the problems that we see with medical negligence issues or professional complaints. How can, as an example, a physician assistant, is the way they do it now, how can a physician assistant investigate another physician assistant on Guam for substandard medical care? There's only about 29 physician assistants on the island. So if something happens, another physician assistant is assigned to investigate, and they all know each other. They're all friends, or they're all connected somehow. It's extremely unfair. Also, when we look at the makeup of the Allied Board, it's also hard for me to believe that the Allied Board chairperson, Ms. Mamie Balahaja, has been on the board for over 20 years, as up to 5 other board members. This is possibly the longest chair of board members of any board on Guam or anywhere. And let's be reflective of what she said. 1998 was the last time they made changes in budget and policies and so forth, as discussed by Senator Terlaje, agree with her. Ms. Balahaja has been on the board for 20 years, and those policies haven't changed. Board members should only be on a board for maybe 1 or 2 terms. The Allied Board has no impartial review system. They keep talking about it, but not yet. We heard it in the last oversight hearing, and we keep hearing it over and over again. It's been near 18 months since we filed our own complaints that have been either postponed or some other excuse. Today was the first time when I heard Ms. Balahaja say that one of the complaints was resolved. Well, if the complaint that we filed was resolved, it would be nice if she would tell us that's been resolved because we never was told. And regarding complaints that come, that when a complainant doesn't know the name, if you're in a hospital, if you're dying or you have a family member dying, you don't know the names of the doctors coming in and out of the room. You have no idea. But these people are identified in a federal investigative report with cold numbers. 18 months ago, we were told by the Allied Board, no problem, we'll look it up, we'll go to the hospital, we'll get the medical records, so forth and so on. As you allude to, Speaker, it's been 18 months and nothing has happened. We can't identify. So if somebody's in the hospital and they die because of something that happened and they know there was a person involved and we don't know the name, that's the end of it. That, in my opinion, is part of the board. And the feds came in and identified the people with codes. Complaints. We hear it over and over again. Very frustrating. Complaints are not handled timing or without bias. Let's face it. Not acting on a complaint is a bias against the consumer. We got complaints going back to 2019. That's bias. In other words, we don't think it's important enough to do something about this. Yes, we have smoke and mirrors and all of our excuses. But to make matters worse, they don't respond to requests for information or keep consumers in the loop. Dr. Balahaja said that you can send us requests. I've done it many times. I don't get responses. Also, if they get around to do an investigation, there's no appeal process of the decisions for consumers. But the medical personnel do have an appeal process. This has been a very frustrating process, not just because of my own situation, but it put me in a situation where I've spoken to, I don't know how many consumers and people keep coming to me. This is what happened to me. This is what happened to me through my Facebook page. And I feel it and I hear what they're saying. And that's why they should be here expressing themselves at a meeting like this. Frustrated with the boards and their lack of policies to investigate and obvious lack of impartiality. We took them to court. We're the court case that Dr. Miller referred to when he said that the AG attorney was busy in a court case, and it's really not that busy. With that, when we took them to court, all we asked for was for them to develop clear policies for consumers, nothing else, not asking for money. With that, an alternative writ or mandate was issued by Superior Court of Guam Judge Arthur Bacinas, commanding the Allied Board and the Board of Medical Examiners to adopt rules and regulations necessary to investigate licensees. That's all we ask. You got to have it so it's fair for us. It's not a big deal. This is the case that Dr. Miller was referring to. Instead of doing this, following the mandate of the judge, which would help consumers, the boards are using tax dollars to fight this consumer-oriented protection writ ruling. Again, leaving consumers as a low priority. All we ask for is for these boards to develop clear investigative policies so they cannot wing investigations and to protect consumers through those clear investigative policies. Instead of seeing this as a good idea, they said, no, we want to keep things as they are now, which as you, and that's where the whole argument came in court, which as you know, isn't working by the very fact that we are all here for this oversight hearing. The boards do not have investigative clear policies, or the judge wouldn't have mandated the writ. The current policies are anti-medical consumer, and they're exactly what Dr. Freeman and Dr. Yasuhiro said needs to change, not to even mention other consumers. We need a functioning board that protects us and doesn't see consumers as the enemy, because that's how the boards, the two boards are seen now, including especially the Allied Board. We need fresh blood on the board. 20 years on the board is way too long. Then when you look at, well, we haven't done anything for 20 years, there's a correlation between that. Thank you, Speaker, for letting me speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lebowski, and I appreciate your testimony, and it brings up a point, or it reminds me of something that I've been also wanting to distinguish, and that is, so we're talking about complaints and the prompt adjudication of complaints, investigation of complaints, and response to the complainants, especially. But, you know, and so some of the delays, I guess, are in the investigation of these complaints, and some of the boards, including this board, has asked that, you know, they need an investigator to help them, where they've been doing these investigations themselves for many years. And you know, the boards are interestingly, I mean, composed of themselves, right? Members of their own fields. They want to be represented, like, you know, it works both ways. You know, we want a board that also has a chiropractor to make a determination on a chiropractor. Well, that was the policy that past legislatures decided when they created these boards, you know, governed by members of their own profession. And this is done in other jurisdictions as well. So I don't have an issue with that. My issue is that there should be a distinction, I think, with these boards in an investigation of a complaint that is like that requires medical expertise. In other words, where the allegation involves they did something medically, you know, wrong, like they, you know, operated on the wrong side or something, as opposed to investigations of complaints, which are also being made, is my understanding, complaints that just professional conduct. And the professional conduct statutes that govern the Allied Health Board are very similar to what governs the other boards. And that is, I think, things that do not necessarily require expertise of that particular field in order to make a determination of whether a person is practicing without a license, whether a person is failing to report something that occurred in another jurisdiction, whether they are exercising influence on a patient or client as to exploit the patient or client for the financial gain of the licensee, failing of fraud, deceit, misconduct, intentionally filing a false report or record, failing to perform any statutory or legal obligation imposed upon the licensee, aiding, assisting any unlicensed person to practice without a license, habitual drunkenness, an adjudication of insanity, a conviction, plea of guilty, a revocation in any other disciplinary action against a practitioner in another jurisdiction. Those types of things that, yeah, I would think that, and so I want to thank you, Dr. Terlaje. You said that you do investigate some of these cases that are not necessarily in your field when the person in that field is unable to do the investigations. Is that right? So,
That's
so I think your board is, yeah. So yeah, I see that, and yeah. So, and I hope that the need, you know, or the delay being caused by the conflicts and the need for off-island counsel is, you know, is very judiciously used only when necessary, right? And that otherwise board members are able, for now, to conduct these investigations until you insist and, you know, make the arrangements between you and the HPLO to either reallocate money towards an investigator or raise fees, or that public health reallocates money towards HPLO to ensure that you cover whatever else is necessary. And we will also review this again come our budget, but it's very difficult for the legislature to be increasing, you know, random budgets when the Department of Public Health insists that this is the budget that will be able to, you know, cover what is necessary. And you boards also, you know, have to be responsible for your own amounts, and that you are allocating them to where the greatest need is. And we've had testimony in other hearings as to where those greatest needs were and that those were being addressed. So now if you're saying needs are changing and we now need it at different areas, that you boards I'm asking you board members to please address that as quickly as possible. But, all right. Is there any other senator who has any other question for any of the panel members? If not, is there any other member of the boards who are here? Again, I'm grateful for your attendance here and to listen to the public and to the senator's concerns, of course. And we, are reminded of your confirmation hearings and that, we acknowledge at that time you are voluntary boards, but you are agreeing, right, to these duties and responsibilities. So I very much appreciate the work that you put in. All right, so Dr. Terlaje, oh, sorry, Senator Perez.
Yeah, I have a question. So maybe if the board members, what is your view of having, let's say, a public representative on the board that can kind of bring in, I guess, a different perspective? Is that something that could be beneficial? That can basically agree to, of course, confidentiality and professionalism, basically if they can have those characteristics that I guess can protect that space, the privacy issues. What is your thoughts about bringing in like a public representative?
Senator Paris, I think it's a good idea. I believe the medical board, Phil Flores is the member at large, so he's not a medical doctor. And I think, especially for allied health, because there's so many professions that if you had somebody who was outside all those professions, they would probably have a more clear mind or no issues. Everybody likes to try to help their profession. So I would not be opposed to that at all.
Well, thank you for that response.
With regard to the social work board, I'm aware that one of the board members doesn't have to be a social worker, so they have a non-social worker on the board that pretty much represents, I guess, the public interest. So that's an example of a public citizen on the board who's not a professional.
Yes, I believe the medical licensing board has one as well. All right, any other senator? If not, Dr. Terlaje, did you have your hand up or not?
I'm going to add that we have a consideration on the complaints that we recognize the conflict of interest and recognize the small number of practitioners in that particular profession. So the HPLO seek off-island expert in that particular area to review the complaint. So that's just what we've done. Now, it's like procuring off-island experts in that particular profession. So it takes some time to do so. So although we want to close cases, sometimes getting the expert who's willing to do the review, it seems to be, it might have some small difficulty in that area that would cause the delay.
All right, thank you. There being no additional individuals to present testimony, this virtual oversight hearing is adjourned, and I ask you again to submit any of your recommendations as to policy changes in writing and otherwise to please address the concerns that have been raised by my colleagues and myself today. And we are looking forward to your rules and regulations and your updated fees if necessary. So this virtual oversight hearing is now adjourned. It's 2:36 p.m.